So brothers and sisters, we are going to go back using the principle of recency and frequency, some of the ground that we've already covered. Not to go back over the same detail, we're going to add some detail to some of those verses that we've already covered, and then we're going to add some new stuff. And you know, we just read Isaiah 37. It is astonishing what is in that chapter in terms of detail for the latter days. I'm going to suggest to you certain things you might not have heard before, but you'll have an opportunity in the years to come to watch to see whether or not they come to pass. I'm quietly confident that what we have here in the historical background for the prophecy of Isaiah will come to pass exactly, even down to the number of the soldiers that are destroyed outside the walls of Jerusalem. What number do you think that might be? 185,000. And I'll explain to you why so few troops will be needed by the Russian Gog at that time. There's a reason for it. We're going to see all that detail that will come out of the next two studies, God willing. When my oldest girl was born, in August 1979, this was the cover of the Time magazine of the year. Now she's 36 years old, something like that. Right, that's 36 years ago. How relevant is that cover, do you think, to the Middle East situation today? You've got the Russian bear looking down upon what's called the crescent of crisis. Yeah, it's exactly that, isn't it? A crescent of crisis. And Brother Thomas wrote in the preface to Help Us Israel, the future movements of Russia are notable signs of the times because they are predicted in the scriptures of truth. And he knew a lot about the prophecies in relation to latter-day Assyrian. And we're going to see just how much detail there is in our considerations. So would you join me in 2 Kings chapter 18, please? This is the chapter that introduces the reign of Hezekiah. 2 Kings chapter 18. We want to see what happens when he comes to the throne. He's, of course, as we considered in our last study, or no, first study, how he destroyed the brazen serpent. Remember that? Then we're told in verse 5 of 2 Kings chapter 18 that he trusted in Yahweh God of Israel, so that there was no one like him in Judah before or after him, who trusted in God with all his heart. Verse 6, for he clave to Yahweh and departed not from following him, but kept his commandments, which Yahweh commanded Moses. That is why verse 7 is there. Because verse 7 says, and Yahweh was with him, and he prospered, whithersoever he went forth, and he rebelled against the king of Assyria, and served him not. Now if you're like Hezekiah, you trust in God with all your heart, you serve him with all your heart and soul and strength, you're not going to lean upon an Assyrian power to the north, are you? You're not going to be faithful to the terms of the covenant that your father Ahaz made through his faithlessness? Of course you're not. And so Hezekiah turns and he says, I don't think this is a good idea to have this covenant with the Assyrians. So he rebels against the Assyrians. Now I think this is pointing forward to something, you know. A government, probably the present government of Israel, is going to make a covenant with the latter-day Assyrian, Russia. But a subsequent government, somewhere down the track, closer to Armageddon, is going to say, we don't think this is a good idea. That pattern is set. And that's what's going to bring the Assyrian down upon the land. We're going to see there's two phases to the Assyrian invasion. Watch it, because it's the pattern for the future. So here we are told that Hezekiah rebels against the king of Assyria, and he refuses to pay tribute to the Assyrians. Well, of course, they didn't take that lightly, did they? They didn't take it sitting down. They got upset about that. And that means that there's going to be consequences for Hezekiah and Judah. Now, just going back to cement in our minds that what we are dealing with here is latter-day prophecy. We've read Isaiah 31 verse 8. Then shall the Assyrian fall with the sword, says Yahweh. So what's the context? Well, Isaiah 32 and verse 1. Behold, a king shall reign in righteousness, and princes shall rule in judgment. That series of chapters that we looked at, 30 to 35 of Isaiah, 30 and 31 are about the events of Armageddon. What's the next chapter about? 32. It's about Christ and the saints reigning over the kingdom of God, recently, newly established in the earth. Yes. Chapter 33 goes on to speak about the overthrow of Babylon the Great, because after Christ has established the throne of David, the papal nations of Europe and perhaps elsewhere will be in revolt against the rule of Christ. So chapter 33 is all about the overthrow of Babylon the Great, as is 34. And the nations who submit to Christ are spoken of in Isaiah 34. And they are described as unclean birds. And they're referred to again in the Apocalypse in Revelation chapter 19. It's the unclean birds who are invited to a feast, to a sacrifice. All right? And they're the ones of chapter 35, the redeemed of Yahweh, who have submitted to Christ's rule. The whole pattern, brothers and sisters and young people, is set out for us. We know that this is latter-day stuff. We had a look at Isaiah 14, verse 25, that I will break the Assyrian in my land, and upon my mountains tread him underfoot. What was the context? Verse 26. This is the purpose that is purposed upon the whole earth, and this is the hand that is stretched out upon all the nations. We looked at Micah chapter 5, and we saw that this is a context about Christ being born in Bethlehem, to be ruler in Israel, verse 2, that he will conquer in God's strength, that he will be great to the ends of the earth, verse 4. So when we read that he shall be the peace, when the Assyrian shall come into our land, we know what that's about. But he's not going to be alone. You see there at the end of verse 5 it says, then shall we raise against him, that is the Assyrian, 7 shepherds and 8 principal men. Now in the margin of my Bible it's got princes of men. So what we have here is 7 shepherds. Now 7 is the covenant number. It's also the spirit number. So what does a shepherd do? Well, a shepherd feeds, guides, leads, ministers to sheep. True? That's what priests do. So when you read about 7 shepherds, you're reading about the role of the saints in the kingdom age as shepherds and ministers or priests. Their role as priests is being referred to. Then you've got 8 princes of men. So what's a prince? Well, king, see? So you've got the role of the saints as administrators, as governors. So here you've got the saints as king, priest. So why 8 do you think? Well, 8 just happens to be the number of immortality in the Bible. So here are people who have been made immortal because of their relationship to God's covenant. And they're going to be with Christ in the day when he confronts the Assyrian in the land. That, brothers and sisters, is why we're here. Well, what's the point of doing all this stuff if we can't look into the future and see ourselves in it? Faith will get us there, brothers and sisters, and faith is based upon the Word of God. Faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the Word of God. And the more precise we can make the vision of the future, the more we know about what God is going to do, the more we're going to desire to be there, and the more we're going to be impelled towards that great day and leave aside the rubbish of this world that is trying to drag us away. True? Yeah, so that's why it's so important for us to come to grips with the detail of this subject. So then, what happens? Well, if you're in 2 Kings 18 still, we read what happens in verse 13. Now in the 14th year of King Hezekiah, did Sennacherib, king of Assyria, come up against all the fenced cities of Judah and took them. So this is the response of the Assyrians who have had Hezekiah refuse to pay tribute, refuse to continue under the terms of the covenant that his father Ahaz had made with the Assyrians. They respond. They come into the land. Well, of course they were going to come into the land. And it's all required because, you see, God is setting the patterns for the future. That's what he's doing here. Look at verse 14. And Hezekiah, king of Judah, sent to the king of Assyria to Lachish, saying, I have offended. Return from me. That which thou puttest on me will I bear. And the king of Assyria appointed unto Hezekiah, king of Judah, 300 talents of silver and 30 talents of gold. And Hezekiah gave him all the silver that was found in the house of Yahweh and in the treasures of the king's house. So he rips gold from off the doors of the temple, we are told in the next verse, verse 16. And he sends it away to the king of Assyria. So you see, he's got to go on the back foot for the time. But he finds out, of course, that it's all of no value because the Assyrians come back again. So the Assyrian invasion under Sennacherib in the reign of Hezekiah plays a very, very important part. So let's just have a look at some of the details here. The 14th year, he was now 39 years of age. This is the year he falls sick. He's cured of the sickness, of course. He's given 15 years of life. He dies at 54. Hands up those who are over the age of 54. Yeah, I can put my hand up. Right. You reckon you like Hezekiah now, at your age, as he was at 54? God could take him at 54. He was ready for the resurrection. He was ready to go into the kingdom. And he's going to be there, brothers and sisters, when these things that were given as a pattern in his time were set out in history. He was ready at 54. And we need, when we're younger, to make sure we've got our course set in life, that we know exactly where we're going and why we're going there, and set our course firmly. And you have to have faith to do that, and you can't get faith without detail. You've got to understand the Word of God. So who is this Sennacherib that plays such a big part in his life? Well, he's called Sin. Now, it's not about sin as transgression, because it's the name they gave to their moon god, the god that Abraham served in the Chaldees. That was the god he served. The second most important place of this god was Haran, which is why Terah moved his family from to Haran. He didn't know where he was going, so he went to the second most important place of this god. You have to leave that god behind, like Abraham did. Sin has multiplied the brothers. He was the son of Sargon, the king who took Israel in the north into captivity in 722 BC. And he comes up, and according to the Assyrian inscriptions, he took 46 cities in all. And we've just read the record of chapter 37 of Isaiah. Chapter 36 verse 1 says he takes all these cities. So here's Sennacherib's inscription. Now men simply can't. They can't avoid advertising their achievements, can they? They do it today. It's all about their heritage. Well, he wanted people to know what he had done. So you can find this inscription. You can go to various museums around the world. You can see actually a copy of this in the Jerusalem Museum. And we've got his prism over here with the inscription. And this is about the capture of Lachish, and this is what he wrote in that inscription. Because Hezekiah, king of Judah, would not submit to my yoke, I came up against him, and by force of arms and by the might of my power, I took 46 of his strong fenced cities. And of the smaller towns which were scattered about, I took and plundered countless number. From these places I took and carried off 200,156 persons, pretty precise, isn't it? Old and young, male and female, together with horses and mules, asses and camels, oxen and sheep, a countless multitude. And Hezekiah himself I shut up in Jerusalem, his capital city, like a bird in a cage, building towers around the city to hem him in, and raising banks of earth against the gates so as to prevent escape. That's all in that inscription on that prism that you saw. Now we don't know whether those details are 100% correct, but I'm prepared to go with it. 46 fenced cities and countless other smaller villages that he took. And one of those was Lachish. Now you see it was mentioned there in verse 14, well 2 Kings chapter 18. Lachish was one of the three best defenced cities in the land. There was Jerusalem, Lachish and Libnah. Now you can go to Lachish today, and the mound, the tell is there. You can see where the city was. It's just farmland around it. So Lachish had been a royal Canaanite city, strongly fortified, one of their chief fortresses of the Canaanites and of Judah, some in your language 30 miles southwest of Jerusalem. It had a double wall and a triple gate of immense strategic importance, and that's why, of course, it was so important that they don't lose this city of Lachish. Now, we read here of Hezekiah's response. He says, I have offended, in verse 14. Return from me. I've done wrong. Withdraw from me. Well, in his extremity, Hezekiah capitulates to Sennacherib, but it proved to be of no avail. He gives him 300 talents of silver and 30 talents of gold. That was a huge sum in those days. You know, brothers and sisters, this is sad, isn't it? Because this was a knee-jerk response from Hezekiah. This was one of those times when he didn't show the kind of trust in Yahweh that he showed later on. And we're all like that, aren't we? We do fail at times. We don't always measure up to what we normally are and what we normally stand for. Well, Hezekiah was the same as you and me. He made a mistake. He paid the tribute and he paid a price for that. It wasn't the Hezekiah that we normally know. It was a distasteful task for him, having opened the doors of the temple, having cleansed the Levites and the priesthood, and repaired the temple, to go in there and cut off the gold and silver. I mean, that was a terribly distasteful thing for him to do. But he found himself compelled to do it. It says in verse 16, he cut off the gold from the doors in his extremity. It was a reversal of his early work. And he was to find out what we find out, brothers and sisters, in the extremities of life. And we do have occasions like this, in the extremities of life. You can do what Hezekiah did, you can do what Jacob, you can try and save yourself. But at the end of the day, you learn that there's only one who can save you from that extremity. And that's Yahweh, the God of Israel, and he was to learn that. I want you to come to 2 Chronicles 32, because we have the record taken up here about what happened at this time. 2 Chronicles 32. So in verse 1 we read, after these things and the establishment thereof. Now this word establishment just happens to be that word emeth. Recall the word that is used about Hezekiah's character? This is the word that is used of Yahweh's characteristic of faithfulness and loyalty and stability after the establishment. So Rotherham translates it this way, as you can see there in the yellow. After these things done in faithfulness. Alright? So when he realised that he'd made a mistake, he had not operated quite as he would normally do so, he corrects it. He does certain things now in faithfulness. He's gone back to what he stood for in the beginning. So what's he do? He prepares the defences of the city. So it goes on to talk about that. This is 14 years after he's come to the throne. He's done a lot of reformation work, but now he's going to prepare the defences of the city. Well, this is where we get Hezekiah's tunnel from. Anybody been through Hezekiah's tunnel here? Yep, we went there last May. We went through Hezekiah's tunnel. It's really great for those who've got narrow shoulders. Those who've got wide shoulders, I'm sorry, but I bumped my shoulders the whole 45 minutes that we were there. It takes you 45 minutes to get through it. It's that long. Right? It's a very... The blokes who must have cut that out with picks, they must have been very narrow-shouldered men, because you've got to sort of go through like this. It's very claustrophobic. But, of course, it's brilliant, isn't it? Brilliant. They could bring the water of the spring Gihon into the pool of Siloam through this. I mean, it goes around like this. And they joined up together, and they're that far out. It's unbelievable. All right, so this was a massive feat to build Hezekiah's temple. And this is the record of it here, you see. It says there in verse 3, he took counsel with his princes and his mighty men to stop the waters of the fountains which were without the city, and they did help him. So there was gathered much people together who stopped all the fountains and the brook that ran through the midst of the land, saying, why should the kings of Assyria come and find much water? And he strengthened himself and built up the wall that was broken, and raised up the towers, and another wall without, and repaired Millo and the city of David, and made darts and shields in abundance. He sent captains of war. He makes all these preparations. And he does this because, you see, it tells us in verse 1 that Sennacherib intended to come and take the fenced cities of Israel, of Judah, and he thought to win them for himself. Or as Rotherham puts it, he thought to break into them. So Hezekiah was purposed to prepare for that awful day. His face was to war, as Rotherham puts it. And he needs to prepare his leaders as well to get the people behind this project. You know, brothers and sisters, it's tragic. We're going to see this tomorrow in our exhortation. Hezekiah found the same thing that you and I find. Some are ready, some are willing, some are faithful, others are not. That's just the facts of life. It's very, very sad what happens. We're going to see that from Isaiah chapter 22. But you know when it says in verse 2 that Hezekiah saw that Sennacherib was come, that he was purposed to fight against Jerusalem, this was of God. God made sure that the Assyrian ended up outside the walls of Jerusalem because it was necessary to set the platform for the prophecies to come. Now that little verse you can see at the base here of this slide, Isaiah 22 tells the story. These princes and his mighty men, his captains and his heroes, as Rotherham puts it, they were powerless in the face of the Assyrian charge. They did all this preparation, but when they looked over the wall and they saw these vast numbers of soldiers, many of them gave up. including Shebna. They gave up. Why? Well, you made a ditch between the two walls for the water of the old pool, but you have not looked unto the maker thereof. Neither had respect unto him that fashioned it long ago. And there lies the problem. You can make all sorts of preparations, but unless your trust is in Yahweh alone, it's not going to work out for you. Now, in our talks tomorrow, especially the exhortation tomorrow, we're going to have a look and see what happens here. Hezekiah approaches Yahweh in 2 Kings chapter 19. We're going to see how he sent his messengers to Isaiah. We read a bit of that in Isaiah 37 today. We're going to see Yahweh's comforting reply. We're going to see Rabshakeh returning to Lachish. We're going to see how Tirhakah gets involved. And there's a second message, how Hezekiah prays for deliverance. Isaiah's comforting reply, how he's stricken with his illness, prays to be healed, gets 15 years extension, and recovers and writes that wonderful psalm of Isaiah 38. We're going to try and embrace most of that stuff tomorrow. Now, normally in this study, we would have had that now, the third study. Because it's better given to exhortation, we're going to push it into the exhortation. So it's not quite in chronological order, but it'll work itself out. So let's then just review quickly what we considered in our last study. How Gog's treachery is foreshadowed in these events. The same time, says Ezekiel 38 verse 10, shall things come into thy mind, and thou shalt think an evil thought, Gog. We talked about the Nazi-Soviet non-aggression pact, remember, and how that was broken by Hitler, and how Stalin was so stunned that he wasn't seen in public for 2 weeks. No radio broadcasts. He was a lump of jelly. He did not believe that Hitler would break that covenant, and neither will Israel. They will not believe that Russia will break the covenant that they make with them. But they will. You see, there was something else about this pact. There was a secret protocol behind the Nazi Soviet non-aggression pact. And the protocol was signed agreeing that Romania, Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia and Finland would be divided into German and Soviet spheres of influence. So when, on the 1st of September, Hitler invaded Poland, the Russians came across the eastern border and they divided Poland up into two, equal parts basically, down the middle. That was all agreed before the event. Poland was divided right down the middle. So Hitler, of course, hated Bolsheviks. When he made a pact with Stalin, he couldn't tolerate Bolsheviks. He thought the Slavic people were a lower class of people. He wanted to get rid of them almost as equally as getting rid of the Jews. So it was a political tactic. It was never intended that he should keep this covenant. In the same way that when Russia makes a covenant with Israel, there will be absolutely no intention of keeping it in the long term, if not the short term. So Nazi Germany terminated the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact on the 22nd of June 1941, to be precise at 3:15 p.m. when they attacked across the border of Russia. Stalin ignored several warnings that Germany was likely to attack. He didn't believe it. He ordered no full-scale mobilisation of forces. He was not heard of for 2 weeks. You know, when you read Ezekiel 38, it sounds a bit like that, doesn't it? The Gogian invasion is a total surprise. A total surprise to Israel when it happens. Yep, it was all prefigured in history. So we have Sennacherib's invasion of Judah. The first invasion of BC 700 captured 46 cities. He went right down. He was down in Lachish. He receives a ransom. The ransom we've just been talking about. He retires to Nineveh. His second invasion, BC 699, was on hearing that there was some kind of pact being developed between Judah and Egypt. And there was indeed, brothers and sisters, there was indeed an Egyptian party in Judah. There were those who believed that they should try and get the help of Egypt, that would help them against the Assyrians. So when Sennacherib got wind of this, he was back down again. So he comes down, he defeats the Egyptians, first of all, and then his army returns to Jerusalem to be destroyed at Jerusalem. Does that sound like latter-day events to you? Going into Egypt first, Daniel 11, then returning from tidings out of the east and north to be destroyed at Jerusalem? Yeah, the pattern is exact. I want to talk a little bit more about this area of the land. You remember the mountains of Israel we spoke about? Well, guess where they make their appearance in the prophecies? Isaiah chapter 10. At the end of Isaiah 10, verses 28 to 32, you read this. This is about the Assyrian. This is where he came to of old, in the times of Hezekiah. So this is the pattern for the future. Look where it is. The mountains of Israel. He's come to Ahaz. He has passed to Migron. At Michmash. You know where Michmash is? About 12 miles north of Jerusalem. He hath laid up his carriages. They have gone over the passage. They have taken up their lodging at Geba. Yeah, just north of Jerusalem. Ramah, that's Ramallah of today. Alright, that's where the Palestinian leader hangs out. And by the way, just as an aside, when we were in Shechem last year, we walked to see the old city of Shechem. Pretty well preserved really for something that's that old. I mean, it's back there in Genesis, isn't it? Yeah, pretty well preserved. Anyway, we walk in there and there's this brand new sign. You'll see it. You see the movie, you'll see the brand new sign. Looked like it'd been put there the day before. And what it had on the top? The State of Palestine. Alright? I felt I wouldn't do that, I wouldn't desecrate anything. But I felt like getting out a marker and putting under there, have a look at Ezekiel 38 verse 8. Because there will be no state of Palestine in the West Bank. If there is one, it will be down the Gaza Strip. That's the only place the Bible provides for it. There will be no Palestinian state in the West Bank. I don't read their Bible. Anyway, it goes on to say this. Ramah, or Ramallah as it is today, is afraid. Gibeah of Saul is fled. Lift up thy voice, O daughter of Gallon. Cause it to be heard unto Laish, O poor Anathoth. Anathoth was where the priests lived, just north of Jerusalem. Madmenah is removed. The inhabitants of Gebim gather themselves to flee. As yet shall he remain at Nob that day. He shall shake his hand against the mount of the daughter of Zion, the hill of Jerusalem. So this is what happened in the past. It's the pattern for the future. It's going to happen all over again. And we're going to see it, brothers and sisters. If we are there with our Lord Jesus Christ, we'll be waiting for these things to happen. The reports will be coming. We will know exactly what's going on and we'll be ready for that day. So the Gogian Confederacy is put together from the 4 points of the compass for the purposes of Armageddon, opposed meekly by, of course, a Tarshish Confederacy coming in from the southeast. The pattern being set for the latter days. Sennacherib's army of 185,000 men was destroyed in one night, in one event. 2 Kings 19:35. And the latter-day Gogian army will be destroyed in one event. The arrival of Christ and the saints. So I'm going to finish off with what you might think is a lecture. Alright? This is like a public lecture that you would give to the public. About Ezekiel 38. We know what Ezekiel 38 says. Son of man, set thy face against Gog of the land of Magog, and Magog just happens to include the Ukraine, the heartland of the first Russian Empire. Yes, and that's why Putin wants it. Prince of Rosh, the most ancient form of the name Russia, Meshech and Tubal, and prophesy concerning. And the Amplified Bible is very similar. And Unger in his Bible dictionary talks about what this means. And he gets it right. Ezekiel 38:39, which deal with Gog, the prince, and Magog, his land, got that right, described the actual invasion of Palestine, as it was called when he wrote this, by a great northern confederacy, ostensibly headed up by Russia. He's got that right. The scene depicts a gigantic outburst of anti-Semitism and a colossal attempt to overrun Palestine, or it would be Israel today, and annihilate the Jew. Now this title, Gog is actually a title. It means a roof, or the one at the top, according to the English and Hebrew Bible Students' Concordance. He's a dominating power, an individual who dominates others, who's like a roof, like an umbrella over them. Well, I don't think there's any doubt that Putin, even if he doesn't happen to turn out to be the Gog, and he may well be, but even if he doesn't turn out to be the Gog, the system that he's established is certainly the system of the Gogian latter-day dictator, of which Ezekiel 38 speaks. We know who's going to be involved in this confederacy. There's Persia, the entire region, from the Mediterranean across to the Indus River that we were talking about in our previous study. Ethiopia is actually modern-day Sudan. It includes portion of modern Ethiopia, but it's mainly modern-day Sudan. And Libya. So guess what's happening in Libya right now? ISIS has got a foothold. And the US and Russia are going to go in to try and get rid of them. And the end result of that's going to be Libya will become part of the Gobian Confederacy. So we're going to watch that pretty closely as well. Gomer, of course, we know refers to the Western European nations, the Galatians or Gauls, who migrated to the west and set up the countries we know today as France and Holland and Belgium and so on. And Togarmah. Now I'm going to talk about Togarmah in our session tonight, God willing, and see some very interesting things that are happening just in the last couple of days in relation to Togarmah of the North Quarters. So this power, this dictator Gog, is going to be a guard unto all of these people. So he puts them together into this great image empire. Now Gesenius comments on Rosh this way. He says, this is a proper name of a northern nation mentioned with Tubal and Meshech, undoubtedly the Russians, who are mentioned by Byzantine writers of the 10th century under the name Rus, and they dwelt near the river Volga, he says. So where's the river Volga? Well, there it is there. The Rosh originally were established in and around the river Volga. Meshech's further to the north, the Muscovites or Moscow. Tubal, of course, to do with the Siberians further east from Moscow. The land of Magog, from which Gog comes, is this land. This is why Putin wants the Ukraine. It was the first capital of the Russian Empire, Kiev. It's its heartland. This is why he wants it. And he's going to get it in due time. Now we know what this prophecy says, doesn't it? After many days thou shalt be visited, verse 8. In the latter years thou shalt come into the land that is brought back from the sword, is gathered out of many people against the mountains of Israel. We know what that means. We know where that is. Which have been always waste, but is brought forth out of the nations, and they shall dwell safely, securely, all of it. Why? Well, they'll have a covenant with the Assyrians. That's why. And thou shalt ascend and come like a storm. There shall be like a cloud to cover the land, thou and all thy bands, and many people with thee. You wanted any proof at all that this is talking about Russia, you just need to draw a line due north from Jerusalem. Because in verse 15 of Ezekiel 38 it says this, you shall come from your place out of the recesses of the north, or as Rotherham puts it, out of the remote parts of the north. You draw a line from the land of Israel due north, and you almost cut Moscow in half. There's no doubt. You keep going and all you'll find is polar bears. Right? Russia is right up in the uttermost parts of the north. And so their fate is sealed, brothers and sisters. Their fate is sealed. Because we read this. I will call for a sword against him throughout all my mountains, saith Adonai Yahweh. Every man's sword shall be against his brother. I will plead against him with pestilence and with blood. Thus will I magnify myself and sanctify myself, and I will be known in the eyes of many nations, and they shall know that I am Yahweh. Now you don't believe, but I've finished study 3, do you? But I have.